Hi, welcome back to the channel. June was an enormous reading month for me, the biggest one of the year. Kind of coincides with me having a week off work at the end of it to help that out. And I even managed to finish series. I mean, is there anything better than finishing off series, especially large ones, and getting the satisfaction that brings that, but also getting that kind of bittersweet ending of it. And I'll start with, well, first the series that I finished, and we'll get those out of the way. With Book 9, Leviathan Falls of the Expanse, I'll almost certainly do more fully featured Expanse content now that I've read them all. But suffice to say that Leviathan Falls is a very good end to the story. There were times when I thought it was going to go down one direction, go down another one, but ultimately it comes back to the core of what this series is, which is solid sci-fi stories told within the context of a like soap opera-esque relationships and intermingled and connected world. We get a sense of all of that here within the book. Can't really talk about it other than it follows on from the events of the last book, going through. But at the core of it are the people and the characters that we love the whole way through. And you get very much, like I talked about, a bittersweet end to what is a series that I think I remember as being more the sum of its parts. I think each book is good, very good, to excellent, somewhere along those in the 9-book series, but that somehow the overarching story and the overarching themes sort of transcend that to make it a thing that's greater than its sum of its parts. Great cover artwork, as you can probably see from that. I'm a big fan of the cover artwork, and a series that I can hardly recommend, especially for people who are maybe not all that enamored with sci-fi as a genre and as a way to get into that genre, because while there are some big sci-fi ideas in here, they're kind of doled out very loosely, and I would say the bigger sci-fi ideas only come towards the very end of the series, where you're really in it at that stage, and wonderful fun. Next up is, well, a book that's been on my TBR for ages. In fact, this is a series that I came back to read. If you know, this is one of the series that brought me back to read. It was very much in the zeitgeist of called. There's classic or fantasy books that I haven't read, that as somebody that was a former big fan of fantasy reading and sci-fi, I should have read. And these are Brandon Sanderson's books, and I've finished Mistborn Era 1 with The Hero of Ages. And the first two books I utterly adored. They were both 5-star reads. And maybe it speaks a little to the maturation of what my reading tastes or and what I'm looking for in books, in that I find the first half of Hero of Ages sort of good but not great. A lot of the world building's been done. This is the end book of a third book of a series that is, well, chunky right the whole way through. And so world building isn't something that we necessarily would need to do. The game follows on from the very much directly from the events of book 2 into book 3, and it wasn't until I was to page 450 that I kind of got a revelation or got a plot point that I kind of thought, yes, I need to keep reading here. I need to finish this book. I need to get to the very end of this. And, well, I barreled on to the end of it. And to the end of it, I went and got a very satisfying conclusion to it. Did it end up exactly where I wanted it to go? Did it kind of wrap up entirely nicely? Yeah, yes and no in some ways. I think one of the great strengths of Sanderson in this case is that he creates a world that is so well designed and so well thought out that there are multiple possibilities that you as the reader can foresee as to being solutions to the problem or the puzzle that comes out at the far end. And he presents obviously one of them, but there were loads of possibilities, and I think a book has to be very well written, very well crafted to give the reader that amount of possibilities, and for them to kind of think it could have been that, could have been that, could have been that, and for it to even present some things new and interesting within that. There are some things that I don't like about it. In fact, one of the key parts I would say of the series is for each book he introduces a new element to this magic system that he didn't really mention or that he didn't know about in the book before, and it feels sort of like MacGuffin-esque in some ways in terms of creating a new set of problems and a new set of solutions, but utterly entertaining. And as a writer, Sanderson few people do entertaining better than Sanderson, and I think it's a great strength of his in doing so. So on to my other reads. Well, I'll talk about my favourite read of the month, and this was quite tight because I read some great books this month. But I'm going to talk about a book that I'd said I was reading to friend Helena. Said she didn't really think it was great. I'm talking about Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Now, I haven't read any Emily St. John Mandel beforehand, and I read Station 11, and I just thought, God, I want some general sci-fi books. I had a very much a traditional published reading month. I wanted to get through things that I thought I should read or that I'd be missing out, and I picked up Station 11. Not that long of a book, and I utterly adored it. I utterly endured it for multiple reasons. Station 11 tells the story of, kind of creepily, a pandemic and the outcome of a pandemic that wipes out most of humanity, its infrastructure, all of that kind of stuff falls apart. But rather than speak about the macro stuff, the thing that's really large about it, it kind of deals with a couple of personal relationships and a couple of individuals and the impact on the individual and how they feel in a moment as they reminisce both about what will happen in the future, be afraid of what happens in the future, but also what has happened to them in the past and how that kind of sullies, the missed opportunities that they had, the decisions that they made throughout their life, and the things that matter to them as people and what it makes. And that kind of very introspective look into something that we basically all just lived through, not to the kind of extreme terms that we get here in terms of like most humanity being wiped out. That wasn't obviously what happened with COVID, but you do get a sense of if that had been dialed up a bit further, we were even less prepared than what we were, or if it had affected not just elderly, it had affected the whole human race in a way. These are some of the decisions that would have helped. It looks philosophically at, when you break down infrastructure, what you're left with, what way you build the world, what things become important, what things we take from our past or what they mean, the things that, especially around the turn of the events as they start to happen, the things that are vitally important that soon become not as important, and how people manipulate those decisions to their own good. Station 11, for all the length that it is, I think is an absolutely brilliant book, and I have ordered more Emily St. John Mandel that I'll probably talk about in like a TBR video. I keep on talking about doing TBR videos. I never actually do them because I'm such a mood reader that I kind of flip-flop and change from one moment to the next. But as you see, I'm kind of making very good progress as we go through. Next one I'll talk about is something that was outside my comfort zone, something I wanted to read, kind of more general fiction. Things that were very classically lauded. And I read Jack Kerouac's On the Road. Now, this book is a very American book. This idea of the road trip or the road journey is one that I can sort of identify with. I mean, I can get in a car and drive from one side of Ireland to the other in about 5 hours. Even if I went corner to corner, I'm talking about 7 or 8. That's the kind of maximum distances that I can drive. And obviously, that is dwarfed by the size of America as a whole. And Jack Kerouac tells the story of a young man who I thought travels from one side to the other one in the course of the book, but as it turns out, he travels multiple ways across the land, multiple times over the book, and in part that it goes through. And within it, he meets weird and wonderful characters, all of the while tinged with the idea that he's a very young, impressionable, and kind of immature young man. He hasn't totally figured out who he is yet. And the people that he necessarily runs into and that he meets are often the type of the people that we do meet and are interested by in our early 20s, mid-20s. And the people that ultimately long term we may or may not decide are worthy of our time, but that we investigate and are sort of enthralled by as we live. And a bit like Jack Kerouac's character himself, there are times when he just couldn't be bothered with the place that he was in, the place he was travelling to, and the places that he ended up in. And other times he was really enthralled in it. And that would kind of mirrored my reading experience of On the Road, because there's times I picked it up and kind of raced through a lot of it. And then other times it became a real slog, and it sort of mirrored what was happening within the book. Sometimes it's really interesting, sometimes it's not. But ultimately, the book comes down to the relationship with one character and his fascination with him. And could I recommend On the Road? I don't know. It's a difficult one. Maybe if you identify with the road trip idea a little bit better, or the places that they're in. Although I don't think the places are really the showcase. It's the people and the relationships and how people act out, and how it's not always great to read about people that are living kind of day to day, minute to minute, and how the relationships kind of are influenced by how much money they have in their pocket and the calling of home. So, On the Road, glad I read it, because it gave me a perspective on a type and style of writing. It's very easy to read, very freeform reading. There's nothing kind of flowery or heavy prose about it. But, a kind of very solid 3 to 4 star book in my taste. It needed something else to tie it all together, but I think, given the time that it was written, and the audience that it found at the time, I think it very much did what it was supposed to do. That kind of post-war America, kind of the freedom of youth and what that meant for people. Obviously hit home at the time in a way that doesn't quite gel with somebody sitting in Ireland on the internet talking. Anyway, On the Road. I also thought about, I'd like to read some shorter stuff, some novellas. I was looking through some of the Hugo Awards and Nebula Awards, looking for things that were very lauded as things to read that I could pick up for a few pounds on Kindle. And one of the ones that I picked up was Nevo's Empress of Salt and Fortune, which is a short novella, but it seems to be part of a bigger series of novellas, which it's a bit hard to describe because I don't think it's ever said that it's set in like an Asian kind of world, except I think that's one of the real quirks of the novella itself, in that it uses like naming conventions and kind of imagery to just suggest all of that. It basically tells the story of an empress and her helpers and the people that are around her, and her relationship as she is thrust from being a position of prominence within the nation or the kingdom which she's in to being discarded, and what that means for her, and how the people around her have to adjust, and the relationships and how that affects them. And I have to say, for a novella, this is definitely one of those novellas that is beautifully written, some wonderful imagery. I like some of the characters that are presented in here, but they're never there long enough to kind of build any relationships with, and this is a novella that kind of I felt sort of disconnected with, but by the end I enjoyed it, enjoyed the literary prose, but ultimately didn't have a connection with basically the outcome of the novella and the kind of the impact of that person's life. At certain points throughout the novella, I kind of read and went, oh, right, okay, I feel that, I understand that. And other times I was like, well, they've only been in this book for about 8 pages. How can I really have that attachment to it? But some of the imagery and thoughts and philosophical ideas that are in here are also quite wonderful. So interesting to get my teeth stuck into. And then last but not least, I'm going to talk about the ongoing reading series I talked about last month. I was halfway through. I finished off Ships of Merrier by Jenny Wirt's book 2 in the Wars of Light and Shadow. But I'll suffice to say that this reading experience, both personally and with the group, it just keeps on building on itself. I think this is another wonderful book, very different from Curse and the Mistwraith in terms of less world building, more events. It continues to be clever. It continues to surprise me. The kind of possibilities and things that I thought were going to happen are not the things that ultimately happened. The resolutions and the character work. I think if you're a character reader and you don't mind flowery prose, you will not find a better example of it than this. And what I mean by that is that everything that happens in this book is very much about shaping our understanding of characters and who people are, and the fact that people are very complex, and the fact that people often change depending on experiences or things that happen to them and their understanding of the world around them, and that every decision that is made within the 4 corners of this book still makes sense, even if it's outlandish, even if it's kind of not foretold in any way. Even if it is completely predictable, it all makes sense with who the characters are at their core and our understanding and how that is communicated to us. I think I may have said in last month that I think chapter 5 in The Ships of Meria is one of the greatest chapters ever written in the story. The chapter that explains so much about the world, how the magic system works, how characters work, how the world and place influences the magic and the people. It all becomes a maelstrom of just wonderful, delicious writing, and I very much am enjoying continued reading on with this. If you want to check out our 4-chapter kind of bi-weekly discussions, I'll put a link to a playlist that you can watch. I'm not hosting it on my channel. It's already available on Varsha's and Jared's and The Fantasy Thinker, and I think you should continue to watch it there because they're both great channels and ones that deserve anybody's support. If you like my channel, you'll like theirs, and that is Ships and Meria. Looking forward to the Warhost of Vastmark is the next book, and that's my reading month. Lots of exciting books. I've nearly finished another couple of books. I'm halfway through them at the moment. That nearly could have added to what was a quite large reading month for me, with lots of exciting plans coming forward in July and August of new series starting. You know, I've finished off 2 series there. Yay! And that means the opportunity is there to open up new ones that will continue to add pressure on myself to finish. What have you been reading this month? Have you read any of these books? Let me know what you've been up to, and I'll catch you next time on the channel. Take care. All the best. Bye.